Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from.
The case of the North Dakota Silence Station begins with something deceptively ordinary, an isolated Cold War communications site, built in 1958 on a patch of prairie, that locals swore had always felt wrong. Officially it served as a relay point for long-range military transmissions, but personnel who worked there later described the place as too quiet, a silence that felt engineered rather than natural. When the station abruptly shut down in 1969, the government cited budget cuts. Yet the final crew left in such a hurry that food trays were still on tables when locals first trespassed inside. In 1972, a county survey team discovered a locked basement door the Air Force had supposedly removed decades earlier. Behind it was a narrow stairwell leading to a single room entirely covered in thick lead sheets, including the ceiling and floor. The seams were hand-welded with a level of precision no one expected from a rural outpost. On a metal desk lay a maintenance log, water-damaged but legible, containing 11 years of entries written in the same sharp handwriting, until the last 4 pages, where the script abruptly changed. The earlier entries were routine, antenna tuning checks, generator failures, weather notes, and the occasional complaint about isolation. But the later entries, written between March and July 1969, were stranger. Times were never recorded, only phrases, like, activity increasing, transmission pattern unstable, and, hold protocol enforced 09. No one could explain what activity referred to, and no declassified documents contain a protocol 09. The lead-lined room confused investigators the most. Some argued it was a Faraday cage or a shielding experiment. Others believed it had been constructed after the station closed, though the welded seams matched the facility's original metalwork. One local deputy who assisted the survey noted an odd smell in the room, metallic and sweet, like overheated electronics. He also said that, whenever he stood in the center, his radio hissed with a low pulsing tone, even though the station had no power. When the logbook was taken for forensic analysis, the final pages tested negative for the ink formula used throughout the rest of the document. It belonged to a different manufacturer, one not sold anywhere near the region in the 60s. Handwriting experts concluded the last entries were written by someone who had not written the earlier ones. But the strangest detail was the final line, scrawled with uneven pressure as if the writer's hand shook violently. Signal is not ours anymore. Investigators requested supporting files from the Air Force, which replied that all documents relating to the station had been destroyed in a purge of obsolete records. Yet a retired communications officer later insisted that the site was never obsolete, claiming it had monitored a specific repeating frequency anomaly that did not originate from any known transmitter. When asked what the anomaly, the discovery of the lead room forced the State Historical Office to send a small investigative team, but within days they encountered details that contradicted the official narrative of an abandoned relay station. The building's internal wiring, expected to be simple copper routes for standard HF traffic, had been altered using cables manufactured for classified research labs, each marked with a discontinued serial format. These cables led directly into the lead-lined chamber, terminating in severed connectors that looked as though they had been ripped out, not professionally removed. Their insulation showed minor burn patterns, as if the circuits had overheated or carried an unexpected load. One investigator produced a Geiger counter from habit, and the moment he stepped inside the chamber the needle jumped, not high, but in a rhythmic pulse. Radiation specialists later suggested that such a pattern did not match any known isotope decay or industrial leak. As they combed through the logbook for clues, they discovered faint indentations on several earlier pages, the sort left by someone pressing hard with a pen 2 or 3 sheets ahead. Rubbing them with forensic powder revealed partial phrases, waveform deviating, requires deeper calibration, and a half-erased line reading, containment breach at 14-second mark. No one could determine what was being contained. Meanwhile, local residents began sharing old stories about the station's final months. A rancher recalled seeing trucks arrive at night, carrying heavy crates toward the rear entrance. Another claimed he often saw unfamiliar personnel, wearing badges with a triangular emblem instead of standard military insignia. These individuals allegedly worked only in the underground section, avoiding the main building entirely. The biggest shift came when a former technician, under condition of anonymity, claimed the station wasn't meant for sending communications. It was designed to listen, specifically, to monitor an ultra-low frequency band that shouldn't have had anything on it at all. He described nights when the equipment would suddenly activate despite no operators touching it, needles on analog dials spiking briefly before dropping to 0. According to him, the anomalies always occurred between 2:13 and 2:16 a.m., and alarms labeled external interference flashed red across the console. When the investigative team requested maintenance schematics for this console, they were told none existed. Yet one agent swore he had once seen a blueprint referencing a device called the T-vector receiver, a name absent from all declassified materials. The more they dug, the clearer it became that the silence station was never meant to go public. Its purpose, whatever it was, remained buried, along with the truth behind the final writer of the logbook. At the end of Block 2, one mystery sharpened. The door to the lead-lined room showed fresh scratch marks on the inside, as if someone had tried to. Following the unsettling evidence inside the lead chamber, the investigative team expanded their search to include storage rooms and maintenance corridors sealed since the late 60s. Behind one rusted panel, they found a series of analog tape reels carefully wrapped in plastic. Each reel carried the same handwritten label, Residual Playback Test. The team brought the tapes to a university audio lab equipped for restoring magnetic material. After careful cleaning, they ran the first reel. At first, nothing emerged but steady static. Then a low vibration rhythm slowly formed, 3 pulses, silence, 3 pulses, silence. Experts determined the pattern didn't match any broadcast system of the era. More disturbing was the frequency range. Portions of it dipped into the infrasound spectrum, detectable more by the body than the ears. A graduate researcher reported feeling pressure along her ribs while listening, and technicians later found stress fractures in the reel's metal casing as if it had vibrated internally for years. When they played the second tape, the room's fluorescent lights flickered, and one technician felt dizzy enough to collapse. The recording was shorter, only 20 seconds, ending with a distorted male voice whispering, "It's mimicking the bass line again." Yet no logs or documents identified who recorded the tapes. One archivist, intrigued by the frequency pattern, compared it to seismic data from the region between 1959 and 1969. To her shock, spikes in the tape's pulses aligned with unexplained microtremors recorded miles away, events dismissed at the time as equipment faults. This suggested the station had documented something influencing both electromagnetic and geological activity. Meanwhile, handwriting analysis revealed the second writer in the logbook had a noticeably elevated tremor consistent with fear or severe fatigue. On the final pages, the writer referenced the return pattern and the shadow interval widening terms no one could decipher. One cryptic line stood out: "If the corridor opens again, evacuate the entire basin." The discovery prompted the team to examine aerial photos from the late 60s. Side-by-side comparisons revealed that the ground surrounding the station had shifted in subtle, unnatural ways, small depressions forming near the building's perimeter, too symmetrical to be natural erosion. Engineers concluded something beneath the soil had expanded and contracted repeatedly. Misinterpretations. But something in his expression suggested he knew more. Hours later, the liaison quietly requested all recovered tapes be turned over to federal custody. The team refused. Audio Lab suffered a small fire that destroyed 2 of the reels. The surviving tapes were moved to an undisclosed location, but rumors spread that someone had already duplicated them. The climax of Block 3 comes with a chilling discovery: a final hidden tape reel containing a voice repeating a single phrase, "Don't let it answer." With the appearance of the final tape, the investigation reached deeper into classified archives, leading them to a retired engineer named Horace Briggs, who had worked at the station during its last operational year. Briggs, now in his late 80s, claimed the public never understood what the station monitored because the truth wasn't measurable by normal instruments. He said the purpose of the facility was to detect disturbances in what he called the baseline field, a theoretical layer of ambient electromagnetic stability, assumed to be constant across the continent. According to Briggs, in 1958 a research team observed minor fluctuations in this baseline at exactly the same times the station's receivers recorded the anomalous pulses. These fluctuations were initially dismissed until the patterns began to repeat, increasing in strength and forming geometric sequences. When charted across several months, Briggs admitted that the lead-lined room wasn't a shield, it was a containment zone, designed to house a prototype receiver amplifying signals that conventional hardware couldn't interpret. The dismantled cables found decades later, he said, were part of a fail-safe removal procedure. The team pressed Briggs on the second handwriting in the logbook, but he refused to name the writer, only saying the man stayed too long in the chamber and began claiming he could sense messages before they arrived. These pre-arrival sensations manifested as headaches, sudden spikes of fear, and the feeling that someone stood just behind him. Briggs said the man eventually refused to leave the chamber, insisting the pulses were becoming intelligent. Finally, the station commander ordered an emergency shutdown in July 1969, sealing the chamber after the man disappeared for 12 hours without explanation. When he returned, he was incoherent, repeating, "It's learning the gaps." Briggs also revealed that the microtremors correlating with the tapes weren't geological, they were feedback waves, produced when the receiver amplified too much signal. The team asked whether the anomaly was natural or artificial. Briggs answered only, "We never found its source, but it found ours." Before leaving, he warned the investigators that if the pulses ever returned, they would not come alone. The block ends with Briggs handing over a folded piece of paper, containing coordinates 40 miles north of the station, an unmarked location he claimed held the real reason they shut everything down. The coordinates Briggs provided led the investigative team into empty prairie land scarred by old vehicle tracks and rusted fencing. After scanning the area with ground-penetrating radar, they detected a large subterranean cavity roughly 30 meters deep. There were no official records of construction, no aerial photos showing disturbances from the 50S or 60S, and no locals recalling anything built there. When the team excavated a narrow entrance shaft, they discovered reinforced steel framing identical to the station's underground wing. Inside the cavity they found a circular chamber, far larger than the lead-lined room, but constructed with the same welding techniques. At the center stood a heavy metal platform, bolted to the floor with industrial-grade anchors. The platform showed markings where a large cylindrical device had once been mounted, now missing. Scorch patterns radiated outward in precise arcs, indicating controlled release of energy. A shredded paper fragment stuck under the platform's edge read, "Secondary array calibration incomplete." While searching the perimeter, investigators uncovered metal brackets matching the exact design used for the dismantled cables in the original chamber, suggesting the missing device had been part of a larger system split between the two sites. One investigator noticed faint scratch marks on the chamber wall, 3 sets of parallel lines arranged in repeating intervals. Acoustic analysis later revealed the spacing matched the pulse pattern from the surviving tape reels. This meant the chamber was not only monitoring the anomaly, it was attempting to replicate or attract it. Nearby, buried in a rusted metal box, they discovered a stack of film canisters containing footage from 1968. When restored, the footage showed technicians working around a massive cylindrical receiver connected to the central platform. At one point, the lights in the footage flickered, and several technicians flinched simultaneously before alarms began flashing. The film abruptly ended with a frame of the chamber vibrating, though the camera appeared stable. The team presented these discoveries to Briggs, who grew visibly distressed, insisting the chamber was never supposed to be reopened. He warned that the system, once activated, could remain sensitive long after shutdown. That night, seismic monitors 20 miles away detected a brief, rhythmic vibration, 3 pulses, silence. 3 pulses, matching the exact pattern the station had recorded decades earlier. Investigators debated whether the anomaly had reawakened, or whether something buried beneath the prairie had simply resumed listening. Following the resurgence of the rhythmic pulses, the investigative team noticed strange physical sensations. When approaching the underground chamber, radios emitted faint clicking noises, wristwatches drifted several seconds off time within minutes, and metallic tools developed a subtle vibration when held tightly. A physicist on the team suggested the chamber might still contain residual electromagnetic patterns, imprinted into the metal structure by years of exposure to the anomaly. This theory gained weight when a drone flown into the chamber recorded periodic distortions in its video feed, horizontal warping synchronized with the pulse pattern detected by seismic monitors. Interference of this type typically implies a strong electromagnetic field, yet sensors registered nothing beyond normal variations. Meanwhile, one investigator reported hearing a faint hum that seemed to originate from inside his own skull rather than the environment. Medical examination later showed no issues, but the man became increasingly paranoid, insisting that the pulses were responding to his presence. The team's lead archivist uncovered a newly declassified memo from 1971 referencing an operation called Quiet Gate. Though heavily redacted, the memo indicated the North Dakota station was part of a national network monitoring unexplained low-frequency distortions. It also mentioned an unidentified signal entity capable of modulating its own pattern. A chilling revelation emerged when the archivist compared photos of the claw-like marks found in both chambers. The spacing between the marks matched the width of human fingertips, but the angle suggested the marks were made by someone using abnormal force or under extreme distress. Combined with the unknown writer of the logbook's final entries, the implication was unsettling. As the team prepared to publish their findings, they noticed increased federal presence near the site, unmarked helicopters circling, subs parked on distant ridges, and strangers photographing the excavation under the guise of hikers. One night, the team's storage unit was broken into, though nothing was stolen except the surviving tape containing the phrase, "Don't let it answer." The team realized they were dealing with forces determined to bury the truth, just as they had done in 1969. The block ends with a final twist. Sensors at the site captured a short burst of pulses deviating from the known pattern. For the first time, the anomaly delivered a new sequence: 3 pulses, 2 short bursts, then a single long one. A linguist reviewing the audio recognized it as matching an early form of Morse punctuation, the symbol for an unanswered question. The question encoded in the anomaly's latest pulse forced the team to reconsider everything they believed about the station's purpose. If the pulse carried intentional structure, then the phenomenon was not random atmospheric noise, it was communicating. The team replayed the sequence through multiple filters, enhancing subtle details. Under the main pulse, they detected a secondary oscillation resembling a whisper, too faint to decipher but undeniably organic in rhythm. This discovery drove them back to the logbook, where the final writer had scribbled, "It's learning the gaps." At the time, the phrase seemed metaphorical. Now, it felt literal. They hypothesized that the anomaly adapted its pattern to exploit blind spots in human perception, embedding information between pulses. While the team debated releasing their findings publicly, they received an encrypted email from an unknown sender containing a single scanned document. The header read, "Project Sevel," and the text referenced attempts to establish controlled communication with an extrinsic responder, detected in the upper Midwest during the late 50s. It also stated the responder could mimic baseline signals to camouflage itself. Most concerning was a final line: "Containment protocols failed in July 1969 upon responder's partial phase alignment." The date matched the station's shutdown. As tensions rose, sensors near the chamber recorded pulses increasing in frequency, almost as if reacting to the renewed attention. Then a frightening development occurred. The ground near the chamber shifted slightly, forming a shallow depression. Soil analysis revealed it had been disturbed from below, not above. The team feared the anomaly wasn't merely communicating, it was repositioning. That night, one investigator awoke to a low humming sound not in the air but vibrating through her mattress. Her phone displayed a distorted message filled with black squares except for one sentence: "You opened it again." Desperate, the team contacted Briggs, but his caretaker reported he had passed away earlier that evening, moments before the pulses intensified. With no remaining sources, the investigators made the decision to seal the chamber permanently. As they poured concrete into the shaft, seismic monitors registered a final, prolonged pulse, longer than any recorded before. The concrete trembled, then settled. The anomaly fell silent. But 2 days later, a rural radio station 60 miles away reported an unexplained interruption: 3 pulses, 2 bursts, a long tone, and then a faint voice whispering the same question encoded earlier. No one has decoded the message since, and officials deny the interruption ever happened. The case remains unresolved, buried in silence, exactly as it began.
Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from.